What's up, football fans? Moose hanging out with you here on today's episode of NFL Daily by Chat Sports. And on the episode today, we have got kind of a doozy for you. We're going to be grading all 32 NFL teams and their free agency grades thus far throughout 2025. Now, before we get into that, tell us a free agent that still remains unsigned that you want to see signed. I'm going to start. Stefon Diggs. I would love to see him on a team in 2025. I think it's going to happen, just a matter of financials right now. So I'm going to say Stefon Diggs, but let me know your player and the reason why in the comments below. Now we're going to go in chronological order. So let's start with our first team. The Arizona Cardinals will be our first one. And I'm going to give them a B for their free agency grades. They added Josh Sweat, which I really, really like, but you know, they didn't make any huge splashy moves. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. 2025's free agency class was kind of mid. So in full transparency, you're not going to see a bunch of horrible grades in this video, but you're not going to see a bunch of amazing A-plus grades either. There's a lot of teams that fall in that slightly above mid to mid grade. So the Cardinals, I'm going to give them a B. I really like the Josh Sweat addition at edge, but let's be real. They're not going to be too much better or too much worse. Going on to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I think this is a D+. This is one of my worst grades for the Falcons. The only real addition that they got was Divine Diablo, and they lost a bunch. Drew Dalman to the Bears, Grady Jarrett to the Bears. So the Falcons, and they are still keeping on Kirk Cousins for whatever reason, even though Michael Penix is clearly the starter for that team going into 2025. So the Falcons, to me, they might have gotten rid of some pieces that don't necessarily make them all that much better, but they also didn't get better. So unless Michael Penix is God's gift to that division, to that team, I'm going to say right now the Falcons look like a worse team in 2025. So I'm going to give them a D+ for their free agency grades. How about the Baltimore Ravens? They did pretty well. I'm going to give them a C+. And when I say pretty well, I'm saying like if C is average, right? Slightly above average. They brought back Ronnie Stanley, which was a huge, huge piece for them. They also brought in DeAndre Hopkins to add another weapon to Lamar Jackson's arsenal with Derrick Henry in the backfield. But they did lose a couple of players on defense, and last year their defense was the biggest concern. So Baltimore got a little bit better, I would say. Not that much, but they're still going to be a powerhouse in 2025, so C+ to them. Now on to my first A grade here. The Bills get an A for their free agency additions. Josh Palmer, Michael Hoyt, although he won't be playing in the first 6 games. Joey Bosa was a huge name. Larry Ogunjobi. They did lose Mac Hollins, but they re-signed Khalil Shakir. And I got to tell you, the Bills clearly understood where their weaknesses were, and they are going to be a better team. I have a very early prediction for you. The Bills are going to be in the Super Bowl next season after they restructure Josh Allen's contract. I think this is the first free agency A that we get in 2025. Carolina Panthers. I'm going to give them a B. I thought they added some really nice pieces. They added Merrick from the Raiders. He comes over. The biggest problem for the Carolina Panthers is Bryce Young. Is he the franchise quarterback or not? Now, I realize when he was drafted, they had nothing on offense. So you re-signed, oh my gosh, the old white guy that I am drawing a blank on right now from Minnesota. He's still on the team, and they re-signed him. So they also added Rico Dowdle in the backfield to complement Chuba Hubbard. So I think the Carolina Panthers get a really, really nice B grade for their 2025 free agency. Now on to our next A, the Chicago Bears. Yes, another A grade. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Bears fan. The Bears clearly had the biggest issue on offensive line, giving up the most sacks in 2025, and they addressed it immediately, trading for Joe Thuney, adding Jonah Jackson, Andrew Dalman from Atlanta. They also added in some nice pieces on the defensive side and didn't give up too much. So the Bears get an absolute A in free agency. And what do you think the best free agency grade has been so far? If you want to throw that in the comments as well, that'd be greatly appreciated. Is it, what team do you think it is? Put it in the comment section below. Cincinnati Bengals coming in with our next one. And I'm going to give them a B as well. T. Higgins was clearly on their radar for trying to get a deal done. They also re-signed Jamar Chase and gave him a contract extension. So I think the Bengals on offense did everything that they were supposed to do. Defensively, that remains to be seen. This is kind of like a 90 grade on offense and a 60 grade on defense, but they're trying to work on a deal to keep Trey Hendrickson, so I can't fault them too much. So I'm going to give them a B-, but I'll probably bump them up to a B because of the T. Higgins and Jamar Chase signing together. Cleveland, C, and there's not much to say about Cleveland. They signed Kenny Pickett, or they traded for Kenny Pickett. He's going to be your week one starter unless they go out and they draft a quarterback that they're really, really high on, but I don't really see it happening. They did re-sign Myles Garrett. He got a massive contract extension, but let's be real. The Browns are just kind of living in mediocrity, and they're probably not going to be a great team in 2025. So I give them a C. They didn't do anything great. They didn't do anything terrible. Let's move on. Dallas Cowboys. I would have given them a lot lower of a grade, but they started to actually pick up a little bit as time went on. So I'm going to bump them up to a C-. The Odeyingbo re-signing was really nice. They traded for Kyer Elam, Javonte Williams signing, although you got rid of Rico Dowdle, who was over 1,000 yards last year as a rusher, and you bring in Javonte Williams, who was way worse than that. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding Cowboys free agency every single year, and this year was no different. So I give them a C-. Denver and the Broncos, A-. I would have given them an A, but the injury concerns surrounding Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw are up there. But when they're playing well, they are fantastic. And they signed Evan Engram. Tight end was a huge need for the Broncos. So this is an absolute A-. The Broncos are on a short list of maybe 6 or 7 teams that knocked it out of the park for free agency. The Lions, I really love the DJ Reed signing. Let me be completely clear with that. They have a huge problem with injuries on the defensive end, and their defensive backfield was not nearly good enough last year. So adding in a really good, solid Pro Bowl caliber cornerback like DJ Reed is something that the Lions needed to take seriously. I'm going to give them a B- because they did lose Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a free agent grade, but going into 2025, I could see a slight regression for the Detroit Lions. Now about the Packers. See, they didn't really do much. Aaron Banks they overpaid for, although guard was a position of need for them. They did get a cornerback, but let's be real. The Packers, they never really get any huge free agency splashes. Who wants to live in Green Bay? So C, because they addressed areas of need, but also a C because those players weren't necessarily that great. We're going to take a pause to ask you to subscribe to the channel. It is completely free when you do so. Help us get to 404,000 subs here on our Chat Sports main channel. All you got to do is hit that big red sub button. Like I said, it's completely free to lock us in with all your favorite NFL, NBA, MLB, and all sports content. All right, up next, we have the Houston Texans. They get a C+. Now, I was debating whether to go back and forth with a C+ or like a B- grade for the Texans, and I really like the Laramie Tunsil trade. Don't get it twisted. I realize he was your best offensive lineman, but they needed to move off of him, and they just got Cam Robinson, some breaking news for you, and they're going to probably replace him at left tackle. So the Texans, to me, are trying to build the smart way. So I can't give them a B because their offensive line is horrendous. But what I can do is say with the moves that you did make, you can get a slightly above average. So I'll give them a C+ there. The Colts, D. They didn't do anything. Jack shit, really. They brought in Daniel Jones to compete with Anthony Richardson. And they also lost a bunch of players on their offensive line. This might be one of the worst grades in all of free agency. I'm sorry, Colts fans. Next year's going to suck for you guys, and free agency didn't help you whatsoever. Jacksonville Jaguars, again, one of those teams living in the mid-range. I'm going to be completely honest. There's a lot of guys on this list that I have no idea who they are. So you lost Christian Kirk, but again, it's the Jaguars, right? They sucked last year. They're probably going to suck this year. Every single year, it just feels like there's a rotation of players that nobody really cares about. And this time they ended up in Jacksonville. So I'll give them a C because, again, they didn't get better, didn't get worse. Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to give a B+ here. The Hollywood Brown signing, excellent. I really wanted to see him go back to Kansas City. You did lose Joe Thuney in that trade to the Bears. However, you did re-sign Trey Smith. So that's the good news. You got to get better on the offensive line, especially from what it was on down the stretch of the 2024 season. And don't even get me started about what the Super Bowl did to you. Yikes. But from all things considered, I think they did a really, really nice job of re-signing the players they needed to re-sign and staying as good as possible and maybe even getting slightly better. So I'm going to give them a B+. The Raiders! Look, I love the Geno Smith signing, okay? I really think that Geno Smith, for the Raiders, is going to get them back to competency. Now, notice I said competency. That doesn't mean they're going to be good. But if you remember the quarterback room there last year, Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell was awful. They also brought in Raheem Mostert. So I think their running back room is going to get a little better. Is it a inconceivable, notion to think that the Raiders might be a 6 or a 7 win team next year? Not in my opinion. I'm going to give them a B+ for their 2025 free agency grades. Now, how about the Chargers? I give them a solid B. They re-signed Khalil Mack. They lost Joey Bosa. He signed with the Bills. But you bring back Mike Williams and Najee Harris from the Steelers. So all things considered in the way that Jim Harbaugh wants to play a game of football, I think they did a really, really nice job of bringing in the pieces that they needed to bring in. And the Chargers should be just about as good, if not slightly better than they were last year. I'm going to give them a B. Now I'm going to take a slight pause to thank our sponsor of today's video, and that is our friends over at Fanatics. Now, I got to tell you, Fanatics has some of the best gear, and it's not just for your favorite NFL teams. You can support Chat Sports. And that's right. We've got our Real One t-shirts that you can get using this link right here. So if you want to buy a Real One t-shirt and support the crew over here at Chat Sports, I don't even have one of these t-shirts. I got to get on that real quick. You can use this link in the comments and the description of today's video. And once again, a big thank you to our friends at Fanatics for sponsoring today's video. The Rams, A-. Bring back Matt Stafford. Go out, get Devontae Adams. And you lost some players that you were ready to move on from in the beginning. So the Rams, in my opinion, get a knockout of the park grade. Like I said, short list, 6 or 7 teams that get a home run swing in 2025 free agency. A- for the Rams. Another one that, look, I'm going to be completely honest. What are the Dolphins doing? The splashiest name that they made, in my opinion, was Zach Wilson. That's a backup quarterback to Tua Tagovailoa. And look, the Dolphins, to me, they kind of live in, again, an area of mediocrity. You never, ever get a great draft pick. You're always around that 8 or 9 wins. If you're in the playoffs, you get bounced round 1, and that's if you make it. So, unfortunately for Dolphins fans, I don't think this was a good free agency period for you at all. On the other hand, the Vikings, probably in the top 3 for best free agencies. And I hate saying that because they're one of my division rivals. But you beefed up the O-line, you got rid of Sam Darnold, you're riding with J.J. McCarthy, and you went out and got a Pro Bowl caliber defensive tackle in Jonathan Allen. You re-signed Byron Murphy. The Vikings get an A, and they should be front runners to win the division next year. The Patriots, the New England Patriots, get an A-. And that's mostly because they were number 1 in the NFL in cap space, so you kind of knew they were going to go out and get some big names, Milton Williams being the biggest one for them, who they may have overreached and overpaid for, but let's be real. He was one of the rotational players on that Philly D-line, and he's going to be an immediate starter for the Patriots, and he's still a really, really good player. They also added Harold Landry from the Titans, so I'm a big fan of what the Patriots did in free agency. I'm going to give them an A-, and that 4-13 record should be around 7 or 8 wins next year. The Saints, C+, and it's really hard to do anything when you have such bad cap space. I mean, they did free up enough room to get up to $8.5 million in cap space, but what did you add? Chase Young? Yippee. So C plus, they got slightly better because of that cap space improvement, but I'm going to be real with you. The Saints got to knock it out of the park in the draft in order to get a lot better in 2025. The Giants, they didn't lose anybody. That's mostly the reason that they get a B to a B plus here. And the rumors right now surrounding Aaron Rodgers seem to be picking up just a little bit more with the Vikings being out on Aaron Rodgers. So if you can sign Aaron Rodgers, I think this gets bumped up to an A minus. Not that Aaron Rodgers is a difference maker in any stretch of the imagination, but he's a whole lot better than what you had last year. So if you go out and sign Aaron Rodgers, that can move up to an A, but right now the Giants, they get a B plus. All right, thanks for sticking with us so far. And if you have made it this far and you're like, hey, I really like what you're doing right now, type real one because you are a real fan of Chat Sports and the NFL. The other team in New York, I'm going to give them a B minus for the Jets. Justin Fields, Jamie Sherwood, you re-signed Jamie Sherwood, you signed Justin Fields. I'm going to be completely honest. I think you overpaid for Fields at a 2-year, $40 million. But with that being said, you had to replace Aaron Rodgers. You lost Devontae Adams, you lost Hassan Reddick and DJ Reed, and you're going to have to pay Sauce Gardner. So things are kind of looking right on the edge of like B minus to C plus, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because they went out and got an extremely athletic quarterback in Justin Fields. I'll give them a B minus. How about the Philadelphia Eagles? C plus, and the reason I say this is because it's really hard to keep all of your talent after you win the Super Bowl, right? Recency bias is a huge thing in the NFL, and teams want to go out and pay players that played in the biggest games. And what bigger game than the Super Bowl? So you lost a lot of these players, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, you lost Milton Williams and Darius Slay, plus Josh Sweat, but you re-signed Zach Bond, and you added in a nice little backup quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, to back up Jalen Hurts. So I'm going to give them a C plus because it's really, really hard to keep talent, but they did a pretty decent job. Steelers, they get a B. Kind of want to give them an A for all the other moves that they made, but the reason they get a B is because they still don't know what they're doing at quarterback. They traded for DK Metcalf. They go out and re-sign Mason Rudolph. And they get Darius Slay, who, in a pinch, can still give you some really fantastic production on the field. So I wanted to give the Steelers a higher grade, but I still don't know what they're doing over at quarterback. So I'm going to give them a B. All right, I flirted with giving these guys a D, but then I started talking to our 49ers host, Chase Sr., and I got to say, for all of the things that you lost, you still retained some really good talent. You're going to get Brandon Ayuk back. You're going to get Christian McCaffrey back. You traded away Deebo Samuel. Talanoa Hufanga signed with the Broncos. You lost a lot of pieces. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be that much worse than you were last year. In fact, I think the 49ers are probably hovering right around 8 or 9 wins next season, considering their best player was injured for the majority of last season. So I'll give them a C minus. Seahawks, probably in the top 2 for best NFL free agencies. Tell me one thing the Seahawks did wrong. They went out, got Cooper Kupp, albeit paid him $15 million a year. They went out and got Sam Darnold, moved off of Geno Smith. They went out, re-signed Ernest Jones. Their cap space is number 4 in the NFL. They got rid of the headache that was DK Metcalf. I think they're going to win that division next year, and you cannot tell me otherwise. Sam Darnold comes in, Cooper Kupp. You've still got Jackson Smith and Jigba. I love what the Seahawks did, and honestly, I might give them the number 1 grade in free agency. Great job to Seattle. All right, then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who admittingly, when you only have $12.5 million in cap space, it's kind of hard to add anything crazy, but they did re-sign Chris Godwin. They got Hassan Reddick, which I think has a lot of upside potential. So I think they made some pretty solid moves. I'm going to give them a B. If Baker Mayfield can continue the way that he plays, even after losing your offensive coordinator to take the Jags job, Duval. I think you're going to see the top of the NFC South for years to come for the Buccaneers. So I'm going to give them a B. And then the Titans. Oh, boy. Mr. Brett Alper, who has been hosting the Titans for us, knows all too much and all too well about this. The Titans, what did they really do? I mean, they got Dan Moore, which is a nice little signing. But outside of that, what else? Van Jefferson. Whoo! That's going to do some big things. They need a quarterback like I need air to breathe, and I think they need to draft Cam Ward with that number 1 overall pick. I'm excited to see what they do in the draft, but free agency as far as it goes, see. And then let's wrap our final grade up with a great one. Another top 3 free agency. The Washington Commanders killed it. Absolutely killed it. And if I told you that my NFC team to go to the Super Bowl next year was Washington, you'd probably be like, that's a pretty good pick. Because honestly, that's what I have in the Super Bowl next year. Bills versus Commanders. I think the Commanders knocked it out of the park. Deebo Smauel, traded for Laramie Tunsil, re-signed Zach Ertz, re-signed Bobby Wagner, got Javon Kinlaw. I think this is a scary, scary team next year. They're going to win that division over the Eagles next year. Mark it down. They're a 13 or a 14 win team. And that's going to do it for us here. And I want you to grade my grades. I gave grades to all 32 teams, and I want to know what you think of them right now in the comment section below. Remember to lock us in and subscribe, like the video, and share this with a friend to keep up with all things chat sports related and NFL related here on the channel. My name is Moose. Until next time, be cool.